Perhaps the strongest difference between authors Scott Lobdell and Chris Claremont in Fantastic Four Volume 3 is the direction that their writing style faces. Lobdell's issue, judging by issues 1 through 3 and the basic ideas that form the structure of issues 4 and 5, largely look to the future. While yes, they do recycle old foes like Mole Man, Red Ghost, and Terminus, they're reinterpreted for the modern age. They're old villains with a new coat of paint, so to speak. The rest of the enemies are brand new, introducing Yvette as Martyr with the rest of the Ruined, the Strange Iconoclast, and the Mysterious Crucible. Claremont's run, by contrast, faces the past. Genosha, Technet, our new antagonist in issues 7 and 8, and Franklin's role in the Heroes Reborn saga are all previously established ideas exactly as they are. There is no update or change to make them feel new at all. They are new to the Fantastic Four, sure, but they aren't updated or refreshed. I have to admit that I prefer Lobdell's approach now as an adult, while when I was younger, I would have loved seeing these old forgotten concepts pulled forward by Claremont. Neither one of these styles are necessarily wrong or right. Lobdell's take on the Fantastic Four faced the future, as if this was a new volume and little existed before it, and it really does feel more like a fresh start than it does a return. Claremont's take faces the past, which makes it fit in with the overall theme of this being a return to the Marvel Universe, and it firmly establishes itself as a part of that universe. Already, we've seen Spider-Man, Power Fist, Misty Knight, Colleen Wing, She-Hulk, Janet Van Dyne, Genosha, Werewolves, and Technet. Lobdell's Fantastic Four could take place in a vacuum, and you'd barely know that the cast had just moved back a universe. But Claremont's Fantastic Four is cemented as being part of the broader Marvel Universe. Both styles of writing have their upsides and downsides. It's just interesting to me how in the span of 8 issues, so little about the Fantastic Four has changed, but how utterly different the two runs on the same book feel. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 12.4, The Power of the Babe. Last episode, Reed and Sue Richards had a romantic night on the town, leaving their son Franklin at home. Given that he was left in the care of the super-strong Ben Grimm and the super-smart Alyssa Moy, they figured that Franklin would be totally fine. But he's not. A group of bounty-hunting aliens, collectively called Technet, attacked Pier 4. The Thing fought bravely and bought Alyssa time to escape with the child, but the Thing was captured in their place. Now, Alyssa and Franklin are on the run in the middle of the night in New York City, pursued by the 4-armed Pharaoh Squared. She runs into the street, dashing in front of a police car, a Range Rover-looking vehicle. The police stop and exit the vehicle as Alyssa introduces herself, Franklin, and then begins to explain their situation. The cops reply that everything will be fine now, and Alyssa notes their English accents. "Wait," she says, backing away slowly. "What is this?" Another police car pulls up, this one actually featuring the NYPD. One of the officers notices the London Metropolis Police logo on the side of the English cop's car. Aren't they a little outside of their jurisdiction? One of the English cops then drops their disguise, revealing itself to be a werewolf. The silver creature leaps on top of the NYPD officer and makes eye contact. A burning flash of light consumes the life and innards of the cop, leaving only a suit of skin behind. Horrified, but definitely motivated, Alyssa ducks into the NYPD car with Franklin. She doesn't have the keys to it, but she does have her personal universal key. Alyssa starts the engine, rams one of the werewolves, and then takes off. The werewolves aren't worried about losing her, though. They have Franklin's scent now. They'll find him. Back in issue 5, author Chris Claremont wrote in a news broadcast that the werewolves had escaped their prison in London's exotic animal house. That bit of story leads here. Werewolves can consume a person's identity and, having burned out the body, can then wear the skin suit like clothing, actually physically becoming that person. Normally, werewolves are hunched over and travel on all four legs. The back pair resemble a dog's. Their heads are pointed, almost beak-like, and their bodies are a shiny silver. But once they put on a skin suit, they appear totally human. This particular pack of werewolves was defeated by Excalibur, a United Kingdom-based group that spun out of the Uncanny X-Men title in the 80s, and they had been successfully imprisoned since their defeat. How did they escape from their imprisonment? How did they get to New York City in a London police vehicle? Why are they even hunting Franklin to begin with? Good questions! Alyssa and Franklin don't get very far from the scene. Despite having a good escape vehicle, Pharaoh Squared is still on their tail. As Alyssa grabs for the police radio, intent on calling for help, Pharaoh Squared drops from above. His 4 golden swords plunge into the vehicle's engine, thinking to kill the car. But destroying the engine means that they have no power, and no power means no power steering. Alyssa loses control of the car, slamming Pharaoh Squared against another car before bouncing into a third one. Man, talk about your adventures in babysitting. Also, I have driven my car with no power steering. I won't say that it was a good time or that it was easy, but it was definitely possible. I'm guessing that the sudden loss of power threw Alyssa off, thus causing the accident. It's a little more understandable. We get a brief interlude catching us up on Reed and Sue's date, and then we head over to Technet to do the same. Pharaoh Squared has returned a failure, and his boss, Gatecrasher, isn't pleased. She reiterates that they're here to capture Franklin, adding in that it's at the behest of the Omniversal Majestrix Opal Luna Saturnine. Man, say that crap 5 times fast. Or worse, try writing it out by hand 5 times fast. The Omniversal Majestrix doesn't appreciate failure, and she has a temper, so they best do their job. Gatecrasher then lays out the plan. Technet will monitor the streets and subways for their quarry. They'll be using a psychic inhibitor to block any mental distress calls that Franklin may make. She wants this mission to be simple and clean, specifically stating that she doesn't want any X creatures showing up. They'll do the job, they'll get paid, and then they'll go home happy. Yes? So now we have an employer, if not much else, and a very overt reference to Technet's encounter with Excalibur. We've got more coming in regards to the Omniversal Majestrix, so I'll cover that later, don't worry. A quick note though, Pharaoh Squared is colored wrong in this page. He's normally a hairy, healthy brown color, but here he is colored green for some reason. I don't know. Alyssa, carrying Franklin, continues to flee her variety of pursuers. And Franklin has been through some crap. He's seen some things. So as a child, he's done a pretty good job of not losing his absolute no swearing. His house was blown up by monsters, his uncle was abandoned to fight them, and then the 4-armed Pharaoh Squared has been chasing him to silver monsters eating a cop and wearing his skin. How he hasn't freaked out yet is unknown to me. But now is the time for it. He's hit his breaking point. He is scared and he calls out for his mother. This escalates from a verbal demand to a psychic cry, as Gatecrasher feared, and it ripples through the city. This is actually kinda neat, as Larocca sets the page up as a ripple. Franklin and Alyssa appear in the center, and then the second ring is a landscape shot of New York, and then the furthest ring out is of the characters who feel his call, including sensitives like Spider-Man, Jean Grey, Doctor Strange, Franklin's old friend who he met like one-time Shadowcat, and a mysterious woman in golden armor with pointy ears and long black hair. She claims to be the guardian of reality, and she speaks of the harm that Franklin may cause in his terror. Even further out, the werewolves feel the call. The flippin' Watcher feels the call, as Gatecrasher's device sparks and then dies. Franklin's whale was so powerful that it overloaded the inhibitor. And while I like the implied scope of Franklin's power, it only serves to demonstrate the sheer power that exists at Franklin's disposal. None of these characters show up to help, even though Doctor Strange actually promises to stand alongside the boy. Don't get me wrong, I actually prefer the characters not getting involved with this narrative. This is a Fantastic Four story, not a Marvel Universe story, so keeping the focus in tight is a very good decision. But then don't promise their help, Claremont! At least characters like Spider-Man and Jean Grey are just confused at being able to hear the call. Doctor Strange straight up says that he will stand alongside the boy and he has magic at his disposal. He could be there in a heartbeat and doing some good, and he doesn't ever show up. So then why bother? There is also a white-haired man. He appears kind of middle-aged, who also heard the psychic cry. He's dressed in a white suit with no other markings. He speaks to the puppies about Franklin's power being enough to challenge the Celestials, and how much he would like to have those powers. And Claremont does nothing to establish who this is. Only a handful of characters in the Marvel Universe would actually be aware of what happened between Franklin and the Celestials on the reborn Earth and their return to the regular Earth. So it's not like it would be common knowledge. Whoever this guy is, he's got to be important. When he says, the puppies, I think that he's referring to the werewolves, implying that this is the person who freed them, and maybe they're working for him now. But I have no other proof that this is the case. I'm going to try to keep an eye out for this plot point moving forward, as I do have a very vague, kind of unrelated fan theory that is beginning to form in my mind about this guy, but I'm going to hold off for right now because, as I said, it's all half-formed. Right now, this dude is just a mystery. Having realized how distraught Franklin is, Alyssa stops running to comfort him. She succeeds, and then they team up, while Franklin guards the door to, I don't know, a room? I guess it's a room. I'm not exactly sure where they are. Alyssa hacks into the fiber optic cables that Con Edison uses to control the power grid. With some luck and some skill, she should be able to summon help. Hopefully she did whatever she needed to, because Franklin warns her that the monsters are coming. They book it, barely escaping the grasp of Pharaoh Squared and Thug. Figuring that they can get lost in a crowd, Alyssa and Franklin duck into a club. They push their way through, actually passing by Johnny Storm, who is too busy flirting to notice anything else. They exit out the back of the club and run into... what is this? I guess it's some kind of gang confrontation? 3 Asian men, who I think are Chinese, are kneeling on the ground, facing 6 women who are wearing red leather armored bathing suit type of deals. Despite having no idea what's going on here, Alyssa won't let these men be killed, so she slams into one of the women. Lao Wei Chung, one of the men, makes the most of her distraction and begins to open fire with a handgun. He tries to tell the women, who he refers to as the Bacchae, that he wasn't trying to encroach on their territory. The Bacchae end up fleeing, Lao Wei kisses Alyssa as thanks for saving him, and then he promises to repay her for her help. As the master of the Golden Sword Gang, he always repays his debts. Then he and his allies hop into a car and drive right the no swearing out of this comic. What the floop was that? I feel like Alyssa just ran out of that club and into another comic book entirely. The Golden Sword Gang? The Bacchae? Territory disputes? What is going on here? I mean, obviously Claremont is hoping to establish some new plot points and some new characters here, and we will see the Bacchae again, just a little ways down the line, but this story element feels so disjointed. Rather than creating a natural starting point to this idea, we literally stumble into it, and then it leaves, having nothing to do with our ongoing story. Why not have Alyssa call in that life debt now when she floopin' needs to be saved? If Lao Wei is a character that you want to keep using, Claremont, then why don't you just use him? In her defense, once the Golden Swords leave, Alyssa does kick herself for not asking for a ride. So, this isn't just a stupid interlude, we also have a super genius being stupid too. At 30 Rock, Sue finally notices Alyssa's signal for help. Massive number 4s light up the World Trade Center and surrounding buildings. She and Reed attempt to call home, but there's no answer at the pier. Fearing the worst, Sue generates a frictionless force field slide to the Empire State Building, leaving Reed behind. She gazes out across New York City, and somehow sees Franklin and Alyssa in an alley between two buildings. She glides down to them and hugs her son. And it's just in time, too, as Technet teleports into their location. They tell Sue their business, the extra-dimensional legal bounty on Franklin Richards, and Sue then tells them hers, protecting her son. Sue then proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of Gatecrasher. Pharaoh Square jumps in next, and while Sue is busy fending him off, another member of Technet goes after Alyssa and Franklin. Bodybag, a insect/lizard-like alien, is capable of swallowing anyone whole. Doing so coats them in a narcotic membrane which makes them docile. She then stores them in sacks upon her back, which is where the Thing has been since losing his own encounter with Technet. Bodybag approaches Alyssa and Franklin, intent on capturing them both, but then she is stopped. Mr. Fantastic, having followed his wife, stretches into the scene and wraps his limbs around Bodybag's neck. Then he slides a hand into Bodybag's throat and pulls out Ben. The Thing quickly comes to and then starts to exchange blows with Thug. Despite this, Technet still has the advantage in numbers and they gain the upper hand. But the arrival of the Human Torch begins to shift those odds back in the Fantastic Four's favor. Through teamwork, Technet begins to fall. But Joy Boy, who looks like a very fat baby floating in some kind of pod, has one last go at them. He uses his powers to manifest a heart's desire on Sue Richards, and in a flash of light, she is changed. Sue's skin is blue, her eyes are an inky black, and her clothes are a green and yellow mix of cloth and armor. She announces that no one who threatens her child will be spared her wrath. She promises this as the Queen of Atlantis, as consort to King Namor. With the flick of a hand, an invisible wave shoves Pharaoh Squared away and into Joy Boy. Everyone is stunned by this transformation. Especially her husband Reed. Sue tells Technet that this battle is over. She then goes to her son, who compliments her on her new look. That's when she realizes that she can't breathe. Sue rushes forward, knowing that her newly Atlantean physiology can't process raw air. He knows that this has to do with Joy Boy's powers, except Reed actually wouldn't know about that because he's never encountered Joy Boy before and nobody has explained how Joy Boy's powers work, but it's alright, we got a writing error, that's fine. But Reed says that he can't wait for his adversary to show mercy. Reed needs a solution now. And he has none. He just can't think. Thankfully, Joy Boy's power wears off, and Sue reverts to her normal self suddenly. Everyone is kinda shaken, and they're unsure about what just happened. That version of Sue was a trick, right? An illusion? But Gatecrasher assures them that Joy Boy only manifests a heart's desire. It is no trick, and it's really no matter. She gives the Fantastic Four one last chance to surrender now that they've seen how dangerous Technet is. But the Thing is still ready for a fight. "You and what army?" he asks. Gatecrasher gestures to the dozen or so creatures that suddenly surround them. They come in all shapes and sizes. There are males and females, robots and apes, big ones and small ones, but they all come in the variant of a red, white, and blue costume. These are members of the Captain Britain Corps, and not even the Fantastic Four can stand against their numbers. So despite our strange introduction to the Bacchae, who we will see again, like I mentioned, it's just going to be a minute, I actually enjoyed the overall issue. Sure, there is a ton of stuff happening, and I won't say that this is all very important stuff or that it makes a lot of sense, but honestly, I would rather have a lot of stuff happening in a book rather than having nothing happening at all. Having Alyssa be on the run is fun, as she has the least amount of superpowers, although she does have a clever mind. Any other member of the Fantastic Four would have had a much easier time fending off Technet or summoning aid, so again, Claremont's use of Alyssa here is a pretty thought-out thing. I'm about 5% annoyed that a book called Fantastic Four essentially stars someone who isn't a member of the Fantastic Four for an issue, but that's the story that we have. I love Sue rushing to her son, even if how she finds him isn't really clear, and I especially love how readily she handles Technet. Her skill, power, and determination are well displayed here. We do touch upon Sue's feelings for Namor, which were re-established last issue, and it is something that kind of threw me for a loop. Like I said last issue, Sue does have feelings for Namor, but for those feelings to be her heart's secret desire? I just don't know if I see that. Oh, that reminds me actually. When Sue transformed, Reed had no idea how to help her. Not one single concept. And for a man who cracks the laws of physics over breakfast, that is a big deal. Alyssa suspected that whatever Crucible did, it wasn't over yet. And this is our first confirmation from a perspective that isn't hers, that we have it. Whether Reed has considered that this is a possibility, or if he will consider it, is another matter entirely. At the end of the issue, we still have no idea who released the werewolves or why they were after Franklin, though. We still have no idea who that mysterious guy who was referring to the puppies was either, nor do we have any idea about what's going on with the Bacchae or Lao Wei Chung. So let's keep reading and hope for some answers. As issue 8 opens, the battle is joined between the Fantastic Four and the Captain Britain Corps. But what is the Captain Britain Corps? Well, for once in his life, Claremont actually breezes through the explanation regarding them. Captain Britain is a hero chosen to embody the highest ideals that the nation of Britain could hope for, a champion who fights for what they believe is right. In the standard Marvel universe, at that time, the last person who was Captain Britain was Brian Braddock, twin of the X-Men's Psylocke. Captain Britain had his own ongoing series back in the 70s as part of Marvel's UK publication branch, and would go on to have some pretty well-loved runs by artist-writer Alan Davis, shame that he had already left the Fantastic Four at this point, as well as Alan Moore of Watchmen and V for Vendetta fame. During that particular series, it was revealed that there were multiple realities in existence. A multiverse, you could say, and that each universe has a Captain Britain. Those captains are overseen by the Omniversal Majestrix, who is the one who had originally sent Technet on this supposedly easy job. With them blowing it, though, she has sent in the big guns. If you couldn't guess, this is another X-Men-related story element making its way into the Fantastic Four. While the UK issues of Captain Britain never really got republished in the States, there are some out-of-print trades you can find, but putting together a comprehensive Captain Britain collection is pricey and difficult. I've actually considered doing it. Anyways, a lot of the story elements from Captain Britain were eventually adopted into the Marvel Universe proper through Excalibur, an X-Men spin-off book that I mentioned earlier. As such, to many, myself included, those aren't really Captain Britain concepts, but X-Men concepts. However, given the scope of the Omniversal Majestrix's power and the role that the Captain Britain Corps plays in policing the multiverse, it really does make sense that they would have legitimate concerns regarding Franklin's powers. It is suspicious that the Marvel Universe's Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, isn't counted amongst those attacking the Fantastic Four, especially since he's on the cover of this issue, but we're going to talk more about that later. So the Fantastic Four are fighting, but not only is the Captain Britain Corps nearly limitless in terms of its size, but they are from so many different realities that some of them start to show up and they are better prepared to battle the Fantastic Four. They start to gain the upper hand, until Franklin decides otherwise. His family never loses a fight. He taps into his powers and supercharges the Fantastic Four. Reed can now stretch for miles. The Thing is punching like the Hulk, and the Human Torch is about to go Nova. While Reed, Sue, and Ben continue to fight, the Human Torch takes to the open air, needing to release some of his new pent-up energy. The resulting blast of power could have vaporized a whole city block, in his words. As welcome as this boost of power is, the Fantastic Four aren't really used to this level of power. One wrong move and they could easily kill someone or topple a building. They need to stop this fight. So the Human Torch scoops up Gatecrasher. Threatening to drop her from high up in the sky, Johnny then gets the letdown on what's happening here. Gatecrasher's device shows that Franklin is supercharging the Fantastic Four, although it is unclear if the kid knows that he's doing it. Johnny also learns that they aren't on Earth anymore. When the Captain Britain Corps appeared on Earth, they weren't teleported into that alley, actually. No, the Fantastic Four were teleported out to this dimension, to Otherworld, with a capital O. So who wields authority here, he asks. Who can call off this stupid fight? Gatecrasher promises that never in a million years will Johnny Storm ever get close to the Omniversal Majestrix. And Johnny smiles at that challenge. The pair fly away, leaving the rest of the Fantastic Four to fight. Alyssa is worried about the battle, but Franklin isn't. Once his parents are done here, the monsters will be sorry that they ever tangled with the Fantastic Four. Obviously, Claremont is using this opening fight scene to set the stage of our conflict. The Captain Britain Corps is a new concept to the Fantastic Four and potentially their readers, so this explains who they are and why they are here, if not exactly what they can do. It's also just a plain fun action scene as Ben dukes it out with other monstrous strong men, Reed has to dodge scientific weapons, and Sue begins to doubt even her own willpower in the face of so endless a foe. Our three heroes are facing down an endless torrent of enemies, and if you don't like that in your superhero comic books, you're reading the wrong comic book. This scene also highlights Franklin's psychology a bit. Since the end of the Heroes Reborn storyline, Franklin has pretty much just been a little kid throughout our past few issues. He hasn't used his powers or displayed any sign of them at all. Whatever power that Franklin does have, he seems to have little interest in using it, except to protect his family. He didn't use his powers to escape Technet, or to send them away, or even to fight them, and he could have. No, instead, he called for his mom, like a child would, and then he only uses his powers to ensure that his family will win this fight. I personally think that even in this case, that Franklin isn't doing this intentionally. He believes in the Fantastic Four and their sheer righteousness so much that his unconscious belief is reshaping reality and supercharging them so that they'll win the fight. And while sure, that is helpful here, it's also kind of terrifying. Imagine Franklin getting upset at someone, like a classmate or his parents, and he angrily wished them gone, and then they just are. Or what if Franklin sees the world as a terrible place? Would his view of the world then actually make the world a more terrible place? Thinking about it, the potential for Franklin's powers is really kind of staggering and terrifying. And that thought is what motivates our antagonists. Gatecrasher well, leads doesn't really sound like the right term. Nor does she escort Johnny. She's kind of drug along, fussing the whole time. She guides. Gatecrasher guides Johnny to the Starlight Citadel, which is a massive floating building that watches over all of creation. According to the narration, the Citadel is sentient, reflecting the thoughts of its master. That doesn't really seem like sentience to me, but whatevs. The point is that the Human Torch and Gatecrasher aren't attacked as they approach the Citadel. Once inside, they meet a beautiful blonde woman in a full white gown with fur wrapped around her shoulders. She's got that hairstyle where the hair covers only one eye, so she kind of glares out of the other one, and it is super hot. This is Opal Luna Saturnine, the Omniversal Majestrix, although here she's now referred to as the Mastrix, not Majestrix. Gatecrasher just falls to her knees saying that this isn't her fault, while Johnny stands defiantly. Is he supposed to be impressed? Opal then introduces Johnny to Roma. Roma is the pointy-eared woman who we saw last issue. She was one of the peeps who felt Franklin's psychic call for his mom and referred to herself as the Guardian of Reality. She sits next to a chessboard that is set up with pieces that match the Fantastic Four. She welcomes Johnny to the Citadel and stands, gesturing to a large wall and ceiling occupying window. Outside of it, looking in, are the physical representations of time and space in the Marvel Universe, the beings known as Eternity and Infinity. They all have an interest in Franklin Richards and his powers. Roma then makes her case for removing the child from the Fantastic Four. His power and potential are farther reaching than anyone knows. Even now, while amplifying the Fantastic Four, Reed can stretch into space and grab a starship. Sue's force fields smash through that ship with ease, while Ben's strength can obliterate it with a single punch. All of that was made possible by a child, and without a thought for it. Roma even challenges Johnny, pointing out that even now, if he wanted to, he could go Nova without a thought and outshine the Goram sun. Johnny argues back that Franklin is only doing this because of the threats that Roma sent after him. Without the danger posed by her and her forces, none of this would have happened. Any damage done is her responsibility. This is an argument that Roma has heard before. With great power comes great responsibility, yes? Okay. Well, Roma's responsibility lies in defending all of creation, every reality, from whatever endangers them. On that scale, why should she care about one family's happiness? Does her responsibility not make her actions necessary, even if those actions are against the Fantastic Four? Franklin is a creature that has absolute power, and what happens when he does something wrong with it? Now, Johnny has heard this argument before, about power corrupting and absolute power corrupting absolutely. But the best way to keep Franklin from abusing his powers is to leave him with the Fantastic Four. They all have superpowers, and they have all had to adjust to lives with them. They are all moral, upstanding heroes, and as far as he's concerned, they are the best ones equipped to teach Franklin, to train him, and protect him until he's grown. If Roma and Opal doubt this, Johnny challenges, then you could ask, I don't know, who's an important enough figure? How about Galactus? And suddenly, the World Eater is there. Roma and the Omniversal Majestrix have consulted with him, and he stated that the Fantastic Four have indeed earned his respect, like no other beings in the galaxy have. Okay, cool. So now Johnny seizes this opportunity. He suggests that Roma leave Franklin with his family. If all goes well, then she had nothing to worry about all along and everything will be fine. But if the Fantastic Four fail to teach Franklin right from wrong, or if Roma is dissatisfied with them, then she takes them all. Whatever fate that she has in mind for Franklin, They'll face it together. As a family. Roma gives Johnny one last out. Are you sure? Do you speak for all of the Fantastic Four in this matter? Yeah, of course he does. Roma nods. Then they have a deal. Elsewhere, the remaining heroes are fighting bravely when they're suddenly transported back to New York City in their own reality. Ben turns to Reed looking for an explanation, but Reed is too busy kissing his wife to provide one. He steps back, exhilarated by the fight, but Sue doesn't trust this sudden victory. The Human Torch closes in then, announcing that he's got one hell of a story for them. Ben groans, confident that, yeah, Johnny's the one who saved them this time. On my initial reading of this little 3-issue arc, I was honestly pretty satisfied. I like the Fantastic Four encountering Technet. I think that they're a perfect group of antagonists for them. They're too dumb to be an actual threat to the Fantastic Four, but they're also too dangerous to just be shrugged off with no concern either. I like Roma and Opal's interest in Franklin as well. Their concerns about him are pretty valid. But I am annoyed at how they handled this problem. To begin with, who is in charge here? Gatecrasher constantly refers to Opal as being the scary one, and with a title like Omniversal Majestrix, you'd think that she was the one in charge of overseeing the management of, the Omniverse. But the second that Roma joins the conversation, things immediately shift, with Roma feeling like the more dominant party. Now, I know from reading Excalibur that Roma is the guardian of the multiverse, she is Opal's boss, but that's never established or really explained here. Why bother with Opal at all if we're going to go straight to the upper management, right? And I know that if I'm Roma, I don't want to deal with the petty emotions of some crying humans from one reality who have a problem with how I deal with things. That's why I have an Omniversal Majestrix. Majest, Opal dear, and do it omniversally. The problem here is that Claremont is so familiar with these two characters and the concepts behind them that he forgets to let us, as the audience, in on what their roles are and how the power structure works here. I'm also annoyed at Opal choosing to hire Technet to acquire Franklin. This is partially because I've never seen Technet do anything successfully, and given the history of the Fantastic Four, I wouldn't send in no second-rate failures to steal their flippin' kid. That is a road to failure, my friends. But my real problem lies in how utterly callous and uncaring that reaction is. No one visits the Fantastic Four and warns them about Franklin's misuse of his powers, or introduces themselves and explains how dangerous he could be. And this would have been a great place to work in an appearance by Brian Braddock. Sure, he probably isn't the most recognizable face to the Fantastic Four, but he has met them before, he is an acquaintance, and they would trust him when he says that great powers are keeping an eye on Franklin, and how they're going to handle him. Plus, given Claremont's penchant for working in his favorite characters into his various books, I would kind of expect a visit like that. There is, however, the complication that Brian was no longer Captain Britain at this point. He had lost that title and the powers that came with it almost a year previous. Plus, he was just about to get married over in Excalibur. He was busy, sure, and given that he was appearing in Excalibur, an X book, I could see the editor of the X line being unwilling to share the character. But if that's the case, why is he on the cover at issue 8? That's clearly meant to be him. He is wearing the costume that Brian Braddock himself designed. I got super happy and excited to see Brian when I first bought this issue. Really excited to just explore another piece of his story and pick up where he left off in Excalibur. But no! I got nothing. And that makes this just a double frustration to me. My other big problem is the structure of this arc. If the Fantastic Four are about anything, it is about family and exploration, and I do think that Claremont nails both of those themes on the head. The big threat here is the Fantastic Four losing custody of Franklin, and doing so brings them into an encounter with aliens, multiversal beings, and awesome Marvel Universe concepts like eternity and infinity. That's amazing! That's amazing! Taking what is essentially a family problem and making it a problem for all of reality. The core of this story, however, is ultimately Franklin and how he uses his powers. And this story does nothing to address either of those things. We're told that Franklin is having an adverse effect on reality, but we don't really know what he's doing to cause those problems. Does supercharging his family draw energy away from somewhere else in the universe, given that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed? Well, then show me that! What if Roma introduced eternity and infinity, and they were like human-sized instead of giants? Not because they chose to be, but because Franklin was drawing energy away from them to power his family. Or maybe they were see-through, or they had pieces missing, indicating that same kind of concept, but again, visually. Or have those powers speak for themselves, and that Franklin's misuse of his powers was consuming energy that would keep the universe running for billions of years. Or say that the sun will burn out 1,000,000 years sooner because of the energy that he's using. We need to not only see the scope of what Franklin's actions are causing, but then we need to see a direct link between action and reaction, so that we, and the Fantastic Four, know that Franklin is directly responsible, and that he can take responsibility for those actions. Thus, Johnny being the one who ultimately takes accountability for Franklin really frustrates me in this story. All he really does is just make some vague promises and then GTFOs, and this could have been done so easily. Since they've already played the power corrupts card, have the power that Franklin is feeding the Fantastic Four overwhelm them. We aren't given any reason why Reed pulls down that Starcraft, so have him drop it on the Captain Britain Corps. Show the Captain Britain Corps broken and bleeding, nobody dead yet but injured, and the Fantastic Four are so caught up in battle frenzy and their endless power that they're losing their humanity. Maybe some debris hits Alyssa, and then Franklin tries to call for his mom, but she no longer cares or recognizes him, she's just so far gone. Franklin would then see that giving his family more power is a bad thing, and so he would stop doing it. I think that means restructuring the entire arc, though. So we end issue 6 with Franklin being kidnapped by Technet, but the Thing and Alyssa manage to capture one of them, maybe Pharaoh Squared or something like that. Issue 7 would then be a dual narrative as the Fantastic Four gather and, using their captive to confront Technet, look for answers about Franklin and why he's been taken. Franklin, meanwhile, would already be at the Starlight Citadel, talking with Opal, who is the cold one, the businesswoman who thinks that Franklin is dangerous and wants him dead. But Roma, her boss, is a guardian. She protects life, and she is hesitant to do an extreme sanction on such a young, innocent person. They would then spend the issue talking with Franklin, and my goal here is to explore how he uses his powers, why he uses his powers, and show that, at first, he's just a little kid. Then, in issue 8, the Fantastic Four are teleported to Otherworld and the Starlight Citadel, and they begin to fight their way through the defending Captain Britain Corps. Roma and Opal will watch this battle with Franklin, who starts to supercharge his family. Opal draws some kind of weapon and trains it on Franklin, prepared to defend all of reality, but the Invisible Woman has snuck into the room. Enraged and superpowered, Sue is ready to kill to defend her child. She can even announce that fact. And that's when Franklin steps in front of her. He sees what having this extra power is doing to her, and he doesn't want Opal to be hurt, even if she was willing to kill him, because he knows that killing is wrong, something that his family taught him, and something that we've already seen established in Heroes Reborn: The Return. He would then draw the power away from the Fantastic Four and surrender to Roma, so long as his family is okay. And, touched by this child's morality and the clearly good influence that his family has had upon him, she would then release him to the care of the Fantastic Four. That is, of course, with the caveat that they take the utmost care in raising him, and that if they screw up, nothing in all the Omniverse will stop them from acting against the Fantastic Four, yada yada yada. The Fantastic Four would then be teleported home, and we would all get on with our lives. That makes Franklin a much more active participant in his own fate, yet demonstrates that he was honestly on the right path to begin with. Now, he really hasn't been much of a character in this volume of the Fantastic Four so far, which is a shame given how utterly important he was to Heroes Reborn of the Return. Remember, it was Franklin who showed the Celestial Ashima what it meant to be a good person, causing her to take up the burden of the reborn world and sparing its people from destruction. Franklin can be a little kid with enormous power and still be a person in his own right, if a writer is so inclined. Here, he's mostly treated as a plot device, almost a superpowered MacGuffin that everyone is fighting over more than an actual person with needs and wants. I also kind of feel like Johnny's role here, while a good one for the character, is also a bit off. Don't get me wrong, Johnny is a good pick for Franklin's defender. Thanks to his fire-based powers, the Human Torch is easily the most immediately dangerous member of the Fantastic Four. One slip of his control, and someone could die. He knows how dangerous superpowers can be, in a way that Reed or Sue maybe never will. But Johnny also doesn't really make an argument here. He just basically says, no, we're totally awesome at raising a kid who could restructure reality with a stray thought, and if I'm lying, may lightning strike me dead. And Roma buys it. And here's the thing, if she's going to buy it, it should be because Johnny is handsome and charming, not because this argument makes sense. Because that is who Johnny is as a character. Claremont even actually sets up that kind of story, with Gatecrasher telling Johnny on their way to the Starlight Citadel that no one is going to listen to him. He literally argues back that he's a charming SOB, but then he sweeps no one off of their feet here. I would have loved if Roma agreed to his deal, and then we got a one-page scene at the very end with Opal not understanding why Roma agreed to it, and Roma's just there fantasizing about Johnny's eyes or his passionate words. Love can make people do stupid things, and it makes people do the right thing too, like leaving a family together, like trusting in their shared skills and experience. Even if the relationship between Johnny and Roma went nowhere, it would fit Johnny's personality better than being an impromptu defense lawyer with no argument whatsoever. Despite all of that, I don't think that this story arc is a terrible one. It's a fine adventure without much depth or risk, and kind of feels like it was meant to take up almost like one more issue and it was rushed to a close. Johnny's argument is ultimately baseless, and it is agreed to much too quickly, while the rest of the Fantastic Four are reduced to pawns in an off-screen battle. Speaking of pawns, the chessboard that Roma was looking at earlier, it not only had the Fantastic Four on it, but Alyssa Moy, the Ruined, Crucible, Iconoclast, and Doctor Doom, implying that the Monarch of Latveria is still very much alive. This is a very subtle confirmation about his existence, and hints that he might become a focus during this creative team's run. Otherwise, focusing on Johnny here does mean that Claremont has roughly written an issue focused on each member of the team now. Issue 4 kinda starred the thing, issue 5 was mostly about Reed, issue 6 was about Sue, and now issue 8 was Johnny. Issue 7 was Alyssa's issue more than it was anything else, and I think that Claremont is still kind of feeling out the team. I do think that he has a better grip now than he did in issue 4, but we're still not solid on how the team works quite yet. And we've still got a handful of mysteries to figure out, like who let the werewolves out, and who wanted to claim Franklin's power. But we clearly aren't getting any answers here, so let's move on and see what else we can find. Next week, issue 9 brings us Kraven the Hunter, Spider-Man guest stars, and 2 new additions to our ongoing cast. Then, in issue 10, Reed's intelligence problems are brought to the fore, as Genosha has hired the super criminal called the Trapster to capture Mr. Fantastic. But does he still have enough smarts to escape the deadly traps and Genosha's superpowered press gang? Find out in episode 12.5, The Hunted. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.